Evangelicals are bothered, but they can't be bothered. Hi, I'm Mark.
Hi, I'm in a lot of pain, and I'm Scott.
Oh,
And this is Church is Lame, the podcast where we try to fix the church by talking about the stupid things churches do that break the entire body. Mark, that's quite the title there. Bothered but can't be bothered. What can't
so
I
why,
be bothered
why are
with?
you in pain? Was it something I said or that I'm about to say?
Not this time. No, there's this thing that happens. It's just part of getting old, I guess. But like every now and then my knee will just start hurting. It'll like it feels warm to the touch, and it's right on top of my knee, like the kneecap. And it makes it really hard to even just lay down and go to sleep because any slight movement will just send a lightning bolt up my entire body. But the pain's going away, so
Yeah.
we're on the downside of this now.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Most of my pain recently has just been in my eyes.
Yeah.
And that's from reading these stupid headlines that keep coming up.
Word to the mama.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So this first one I wanted to talk about because it kind of punched me right in the eyes and right in the eye holes there. And it was just so Relevant magazine came out and it was like most white evangelicals are bothered by the thought of an America with fewer Christians.
Okay.
And and like for some people that's kind of like and like
Yeah.
this is the trend that America's been on for a long time. In fact, we've seen it in Europe and basically, the quote unquote West, like this has been the trend.
Right.
And I mean, I guess like on one side, I can understand why you're bothered.
Mm-hmm.
But the interesting thing is that so it says that only 28% of white Catholics were bothered. And then 16% of non-white evangelicals were bothered. Yeah. And then among non-evangelical white Christians, just 22% were bothered. So that's the thing that's bothering evangelicals. And I think my big question here is why does this bother you?
Yeah.
But it does not bother, Catholics and Orthodox and non-white Christians. I mean, and that's the really weird part is that is that the highest percentage is centered on white evangelicals.
Yeah.
And so and to me, I like my initial reaction to this, right, is, I'm thinking of, Jesus sends out his disciples and says, okay, go to the lost sheep of Israel and tell them about me. Tell them Messiah's here. Aha. And, and so, they go out and he says, okay, look, if they welcome you, they welcome you. Freaking great.
Yeah.
If they don't, and I'm just going to say this, this, Matthew 10:14, Mark 6:11, and Luke 9:5. These are parallel verses. Yeah, he says, shake the dust off your feet.
Yeah.
When you leave that town. If they don't want to hear what you have to hear, it has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with their unbelief. Just, you have nothing to hold you to that. Just get out.
Right.
So, like, to me, it seems like if the number of people being Christians in America is going down, like, I don't think that that's a great thing, but it's also not a thing that, like, if we are doing our job as the church, that should really be our concern.
Yeah.
Or is it that these white evangelicals can't be bothered to actually do the work to preach?
Yeah.
And to, and to spread the gospel.
Right. Yeah. So there's a lot of layers to this onion, right?
Yeah.
So let's do the obvious layers, and then we can like drill. Look, the obvious layers is we don't like to deal with the fact that we are a nation founded on racism, right? We forcibly took this land from the Native Americans that were here before us. We stole Native Africans and forced them to work the land in order to make us money, right? And so we like to forget about that part so we can create this delusion that we are a white Christian country, right? And that's how this country likes to see itself, as white and as Christian. But the only way you can get there is by deleting all these big swaths of our history, right? And so, yeah, it's interesting that there's these people that are bothered by the idea of becoming dwindled or marginalized after spending the bulk of this country's history marginalizing others,
Hmm.
An interesting irony. And there's just like the larger historical context that, if you believe that most empires only last the average of 250 years, then you have to know that the United States is probably like we're probably over the hill, and we are now on the downward part of that timeline, and that it's not just time for white evangelicalism to come to an end, but probably on the whole, like we're probably now in like the final third of this thing we call the American experiment.
Yeah, which is its own special thing. And
Yeah,
and when I'm looking at these numbers that are in this article from Relevant, it's interesting because this guy Ryan Burge is the guy who did this study.
yeah.
And so when he pulled out, it's 68% of white evangelicals say that it's an issue, whereas 16%. I mean, so that's a huge span, but only 16% of non-white evangelicals agree with that statement.
So here's
Like,
an interesting question.
that kind of brings me back to like your point, like how America was founded
so
on.
yeah. So when you read the study, did they ask the follow-up question, like, okay, so you say you're bothered. On a scale of 1 to 5, how bothered are you? Because that says a lot. Like, if you're only bothered enough to fill out a form, who the heck cares? Like, if you are so bothered that, like, you are literally raging and your hair's on fire, then the next question is, well, why aren't you doing anything about this? Like, what good does raging on Facebook do if you're really concerned? Like, so that would be interesting to know. Like,
Mhm.
of these people polled and who responded, like, yes, this is concerning to me. Like, just how concerning is it?
Yeah, and I mean, I can get where you're coming from. Like for me though, it's that you're concerned about it so much more than non-whites. Like it seems to me like your concern is white evangelicalism is dwindling, and that's the thing that bugs you. And perhaps like the biggest thing is that people of color, um, upon whom Christianity was forced when they were forcibly brought here from their place in another country.
Yeah.
Like you have that cultural memory of having this thing forced on you.
Yeah.
So it just like it makes me feel dirty.
Mm-hmm.
Just because it really does seem like it is a racist thing, not merely Christianity, but that it's like white Christianity is the issue at play here. And maybe I'm just reading into it too much, but it's hard not to read it that way for me.
Yeah. I think what I've been learning lately is that there's a subtle difference between like straight out and out racism and what we now call white privilege, which is kind of the legacy of racism,
Mhm.
right? And so I think what we're seeing in this headline is not necessarily racism itself, but of the white privilege that continues to exist even after we've extinguished the worst remnants of racism, right?
Yeah.
Like there was this long stretch of time where it seemed like we were all together on a shared road of becoming a more perfect union, um, and we've always seen kind of like those racists in the South. We've always seen them as an outlier, or militant groups like the Black Panthers, right?
Hmm.
Like we could see that, like, well, there's these outliers on the fringes, but for the most part, we are working towards a more perfect union. And then something happened, and that the veil got torn away. I think it happened with Newt Gingrich in that era. I think it can very clearly be seen happening after we got our first black president. That it was
Hmm.
time for the gloves to come off, and white America came back and said, "Look, the time for wokeness is over. Like, we want our white America, and now we're just going to be very plain about it, and like the T-shirts say, F your feelings, you know."
Yeah. And one of the things that article brought up is that was a 43% of the people polled said that being a Christian is an important part of being an American,
Yeah.
which is on its own a horrifying thing for somebody to make. So it's
Yeah.
so maybe that's the problem, is that it's just, I mean, I hate to bring everything back to Christian nationalism because it's so easy to do that.
Right.
But unfortunately, that article from Relevant, the information that they provided, at least, that's where it leads me to.
Yeah. Yep. So sorry if you're Muslim, if you're Jewish, if you're atheist, if you're agnostic, if you're Sikh, if you're Wiccan. Sorry, you don't count.
Yeah, you're just not American.
No, you're just an outlier. Sorry.
Yeah, and I can imagine though that, like, your typical evangelical, white evangelical, that I would ask, like, why does it bother you that less people in America are being Christian? I really suspect that a big part of it's going to be, there's that, the quote neighborly concern is a term used in the article.
Yeah.
That these people are going to go to hell for eternity. And of course, I can buy that as a reason for it to bug you. But again, Jesus said, shake the dust off your feet. So if you've done what you need to do, then there's nothing else to do.
Yeah.
So this is why it's hard for me not to see it as like a Christian nationalism thing, right? It's because, either you think it reflects bad on you as a Christian, which it should not, because Jesus said, if you're doing it, then no, don't worry about it. So either they just don't understand that teaching. Maybe it's their pastors are teaching them like, well, it reflects badly on you if you can't convert somebody. Which, if that's the experience you've had, slap your pastor. You have my permission.
Yeah.
Not that my permission adds up to a whole lot, since I have no authority here.
Right.
But I won't judge you, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Because that's just, no, like, you shouldn't be guilt tripped for not being an effective enough Christian.
But that's not it. And that's not it. Because if these people really, like, if you really cared about my eternal status, like, you would walk up to me and say, do you believe in Jesus? Or can I talk to you about Jesus or something, right? But that never happens anymore, right? And so that tells you that, no, the idea that so many people are going to hell is not really the concern.
Yeah, I mean, I never ask people if they want to talk about Jesus. If I ask them if they want to talk about Zarathustra, because just nobody expects that. Well, that and the Spanish Inquisition. But that's neither here nor there. And, nobody listening to this is probably a Monty Python fan anyway.
Right.
but it's like, I want to have, like, the most positive attitude about this that I can, right? I kind of want to give them the benefit of the doubt, right? Because if we're talking about how is this a situation that will break the church? And it breaks the church because it's tying some aspect of your Christianity to something external to you that's not Jesus. So, either you need your country to be more Christian for some reason. I mean, I guess in God's eyes, the country only needs to be as Christian as it's willing to be, if that statement came out right.
Yeah, I think I understand what you're trying to say there. I disagree, though. I think how this breaks the church is an example of people expressing ideas that are safe but not true, right? It's kind of, it's like putting your
explain that some more.
So, like, for instance, you go to a ball game and there's a part of the ball game where everybody stands up and puts their hand over their heart, or they take their hat off their head, and they look at a flag and music plays, right? The national anthem plays. And everybody does it, but not everybody is actually a big fan of the flag. Not everybody is committed to America, right? But it's easier just to put your hand over your heart and go with the flow so you can enjoy the ball game, because you're actually committed to the ball game. But putting your hand over your heart and singing the national anthem is the price of entry. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so here, when we have people saying, well, they're concerned about fewer Christians, well, that's just the price of admission, right? Because they can't say the thing that they really want to say. So that's as close as they can get to saying it, right?
So like
is what
there's
I'm saying.
either a
Yeah.
cultural aspect or like it's from the pulpit that they're hearing this and so they're just kind of going along with it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Or am I like not understanding you?
No, yeah, like so. What I'm saying is that most evangelicals aren't bothered by the thought of an America with fewer or Christians.
Mhm.
So they're not really bothered by the thought of an America with fewer Christians. They're really bothered by the thought of an America with less influence.
Okay, so like how does the Christianity tie into that influence?
Exactly. Right now, most white people in America consider it important to think of America as a Christian country.
Yeah.
So through the combination of white and Christianness, they get to exert influence. You
Mhm.
take away their whiteness and or Christianness, you take away their influence.
Yeah,
So
I can totally see where you're coming from.
so
Now. Yeah.
this is code that white people are always the privileged and are always the powerful, and the real concern is that we lose our power.
Mhm.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with the state of spirituality in America.
Yeah, and yeah, I've got nothing else to add to that. But then my thoughts then like, what can we do as Christians to encourage anybody who honestly believes that they don't need to be that concerned about it, or somebody who just kind of performatively says it, that they're allowed not to agree with it. Like,
Yeah, can I quote the great prophet Carlos Santana?
go for it.
So what Carlos Santana once said about Rob Thomas, who is the lead singer of Matchbox 20, is he said, and if you're watching the video, I'll actually do the hand motions. He said his words and his music are one, right?
Hmm.
And so, as Christ followers, our words and deeds need to be the same, right? You can't just say that a world with fewer Christians is worrisome to you. Like your faith without works is dead. And so if you look at the whole of your life, and the whole of your life isn't about building the church in your community, in your backyard, in your family, in your nation, whatever that is. Like if your life is a typical American life, then there's going to be a moment where the rest of us kind of look at you with this kind of uncanny valley kind of experience. Like, well, you say one thing, but you live this way, so I'm more inclined to believe the life you lived other than the words you say. And that's the encouragement, is that if this is really important to you, then your actions and your words need to match.
Dig it.
Yeah.
I think that'll preach.
I think so.
All right, so let's move on.
Moving along.
All right, so this next one, I actually have a whole bunch from christianheadlines.com. I'm not really sure how that worked. I guess they just had the good ones.
They're an excellent aggregator of all these other
Yeah.
news sources. It's true. They really are.
Yeah. So this first one is really weird.
Yeah.
So it's only 43% of Christians can define tithing,
That is so weird. Who doesn't know
according to a
tithing?
poll from the Barna Group.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, how? Like
Yeah.
43, like, okay, so I have thoughts on this, of course. But what I can say is that there's like a certain amount of, I guess, hatred, or let's just say shade, right, that gets thrown at preachers when they talk about tithing, right? Because we've got these snakes out there who are like, spending millions of dollars on themselves to get airplanes and Bentleys instead of feeding poor people, right?
Right.
So that shade is well deserved, but
Yes.
like your average church kind of needs every dollar it can get.
Right. That's exactly
'Cause
right.
they're broke.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like just that well-deserved shade for like the few horrible examples have like tainted the pulpit to the point where people aren't able to just actually preach on tithing and what it is and actually explain it to people. Cause to me, it's easy to define. It's like, do you want a church to go to that has heat in the wintertime? If so, yeah, tithe.
Yeah.
It's like, that's what tithing is. Tithing, God does not need your money, but your church does. if you want to have facilities, if you want to give money to poor people and, all that stuff and have like, pastors, and I feel like that's something we should be able to talk about as a church and talk about it in an unashamed way. I don't know, I feel maybe it's just like we kind of have that, like that politeness in our culture that like, you're not supposed to talk about money
Yeah.
and polite. I don't know. What do you think about it?
So that's so. Yes, we should be able to talk unashamedly about money in the church.
Okay.
Where I split paths from you is this idea that a church has to be a collection of people in a building with a mortgage, that has salaried staff that need insurance benefits and things like that. Yes, that's what many churches are and financially can sustain themselves. But when I go to my New Testament, I see a collection of people who got together at houses and gave from what they had to meet the needs of others, right? And so tithing is actually something that has a much longer history than what we see in the New Testament, right?
Right, because the Old Testament examples like are much different.
Right.
Because like there is like this idea of tithing, but then there's like all these other sacrifices, and like when you read through all the sacrifices, you see a lot of them where it's like they do this to the sacrifice, and then the priests bugger off with the meat.
Yeah.
Because it's like to take care of the priests. And when I'm talking about it, I wasn't like trying to communicate this idea that like church has to be like its own building and all that stuff. You certainly can have house churches. But a lot of us, we aren't in house churches. I'd say probably most of us are in just like we have a church facility.
Right.
And, we certainly, if we want to have that facility and we want to have like, organized programs, then yeah, these things take infrastructure, they take cost. But of course,
right.
I think, home churches are not something, I think home churches are something we need to maybe consider more given.
Well, my point being, like last week, we talked about how you and I and the rest of the world, we are constantly in a state of perpetual renegotiation with the word, right?
Mm-hmm.
Except for this one thing. We have this monolith that we call the church, and we don't renegotiate it, right? For lots of reasons, right? Like if you're like a high level bishop in a church in New York, you live like a king. You don't want to renegotiate it, right? But I don't think that. I think we need to. I think we need to have a serious conversation about whether, like, what ideas are old and what ideas should be rethought of, because it's the lamest. It's the lamest reason to tithe in the world. Hey guys, we need you to tithe because we have a water bill. Hey guys, we need you to tithe because we need to pay staff. We need to tithe because we want to have a summer fun days. Like, no, that's the lamest reason in the world. What you want to do is you want to build a church that is so alive and so exciting that when people come, you don't have to ask them to tithe. That they are excited to do their part to keep this living organizing, to actually help it to grow. That's where you want to be. If you're at the place where you have to explain to your people, like, hey guys, let's turn to this page in the Bible so you can understand why we came to 10%, not 9.5 or 10.2. Like, you're already doing it wrong. You're already done. You're already finished. And that's my take on it. That like that's not the way Apple sells computers, by justifying their price.
Well, no, but like it's not about justifying the price. It's about what do you want out of your congregation? What do you want your congregation to be able to do?
And that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying, though. Like, if what I'm saying is like, great. Well, I don't think most people want their money to be going to paying the interest payments on a loan that you should have never taken in the first place. You know what I mean?
That's true. But I feel like we're kind of maybe getting a little bit far afield here, because because this is all stuff like what we should know what tithing is and what purpose it serves in the church. It shouldn't be a thing where like a minority of Christians understand what purpose it's supposed to do, because even within the context of a small home church, there will be the occasional tithe, because people will say, well, hey, let's do some Thanksgiving baskets. That's going to be basically a tithe. To say that it has to be a fixed amount is an absurdity. To say that everybody has to tithe, I think, is also an absurdity. And if people don't understand tithing and its purpose, maybe that is part of it. Like, I'm not saying that like we need to like reevaluate how we are doing church, as like a universal thing. But I think individually we need to like look at our own congregations and kind of say, can we be doing more if we did church differently? Because if tithing isn't serving God's purposes, then that tithing isn't serving any purpose.
Yeah, I'm down with that for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Next thing. So
You're all about the stats in this week's articles. You're all about the numbers.
I didn't mean to.
Yeah, this is like, yeah, okay.
But okay, so like this is a real fun, goofy one.
Okay.
So Christian headlines, and they had the headline, 1 in 4 Democratic voters believe men can get pregnant, according to a new poll.
What?
So like my question is, how in the F is this a Christian headline? This is a political party you're talking about. So it almost seems like what you're saying, because like it's implying the absurdity that a man can get pregnant. Thus, it's implying the absurdity of Democrats as being not Christians. That's the subtext to this friggin' headline. And it makes me pretty mad.
Yeah.
Not to mention, like, it doesn't actually link this, and it's kind of insensible, right? Like it talks about like people saying, well, can men be pregnant or whatever? And it's like, and then it's talking about like how the Biden administration has, and the Democratic Party has embraced the terms quote unquote pregnant people, birthing people, and pregnant, instead of pregnant women, because of some sort of like transgender, conspiracy of some kind.
Yeah.
Which seems like it's really shoehorned into this article. It's like, it's just using it as this thing as an excuse to like say, well, look how stupid these people are.
Right.
Of course, I don't know if you've ever heard of this thing called an ectopic pregnancy.
Right.
If you're not familiar with it, go look up what it is. But you can read more about it, but the short and skinny of it, or tall and skinny, short and fat, I don't know.
Yeah.
Some kind of dimensions of this are that an embryo can be implanted in a non-uterine tissue,
Right.
and it will start to gestate.
Yeah.
This is not to say that will come to term,
Right.
but what it means is that you can have an ectopic pregnancy in a male by implanting the appropriate thing.
Right.
So in a very technical sense, as bizarre as it is, yes, men can get pregnant. It won't successfully execute into a full pregnancy. But, when we live in a world in which, pronouns are a thing that matters, to a lot of people, like saying pregnant women isn't really helpful, because if someone identifies as male, but they are still, have a uterus, that means, they can be pregnant.
Yeah.
So it's just
Mark, you just need to stop talking science. They don't.
I know.
You just stop. Like facts and science have no place in this conversation.
Right. But I would like to know, just pivot very quickly into the last article I want to look at here.
Yeah.
And there's a combination of Christian headlines and one from CBN.
Okay.
And they're talking about the same situation.
Yeah.
And there's this one, the Christian headlines one is this teacher who is jailed
Mm-hmm.
for refusing to use the correct pronouns for a child in their class.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why they were jailed. Honestly, no idea why that was the response, but they were jailed for it.
Oh, they refused to use the trans pronouns.
Yeah, but I'm not sure why this is a jail thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
just why isn't it just like a civil citation or something?
Yeah. Or
But either way.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
They go to court,
Yeah.
and then they win their case.
Yeah.
Which is, cool,
Yeah.
I guess, because it's pretty lame
Yeah.
that they should have gone to jail over this.
Right.
But there's a few things going on here.
Yeah.
One, you're a Christian and a teacher in an environment that is not explicitly a Christian environment. And so you're deciding to impose your belief on somebody else. And that's not how Christianity is supposed to run.
Right.
Again, shake the dust off your feet if they don't like what you got to say.
Yeah.
Okay. Two, there's like this entitlement that this Christian teacher decided that if their environment, their secular environment, isn't providing them a place where they can work as a Christian, well, they are entitled to coerce the world, quote unquote, you know, to use biblical terms, to shape around their desires, and
Yeah.
not just to take the responsibility for their own decision, you know, for their own life, and say, look, I cannot be a teacher in this environment anymore, and just gracefully stepping down.
Yeah.
And then there's just like this idea, like they sued over the ability to use the wrong pronouns at a child, which is not going to be something that that child is going to respond positively to. So like, you wanted to stick up for your right to be a jag to a kid, like all around, you know, it's just, it's annoying. I mean, it's like, you know, what I'm looking at. So like, if you go to 1 Corinthians, chapter 5, 12 to 13, there's kind of a few things like, you know, what do I care about the world and what it does? You know, Paul again saying that. If you look at, you know, 1 Corinthians, 1 to 2, just generally speaking, there's a lot of stuff in there about how we don't need to really concern ourselves with what the world wants to be. Like, it's not our job to make the world fit our mold. We can only be responsible for ourselves. Like, when I was reading this, I was thinking about, you know, Matthew 4, where it's talking about the temptations of Jesus. And it said, again, the devil took Jesus to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. And the whole point was, he was saying, like, just bow to me and I'll give this to you. Like, I feel like that's kind of what is happening here. It's like the devil is taking, you know, some Christians up to the top of the mountain saying, I'll give this to you. And they're like, yeah, I want it. And demanding that it's theirs now, rather than realizing that, no, Jesus refused to you know, these gifts from the devil. So should you.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have anything to add, contradict, whatever. I'm good.
I think one of the perks of getting older, like older than you and I, like there's a certain age where you just stop giving a rip about anything, right? You just want what you want. You don't want to justify yourselves, and you just want the young people to get in line and respect you, right? And so we are now at a point in time where there's like the baby boomers are starting to age out. For the most part, they haven't had to deal with a whole lot of it, right? There have always been, you know, they lived through the flower power movement. You know, they lived through, you know, peace, love, dope. You know, they lived through all this, and transgenderism, LGBTQ issues were never shoved in their face as like, you need to deal with my pronouns. You need to deal with my sexuality. It was just kind of this thing that was off to the side, mostly because people who were in the closet were afraid of the repercussions of coming out of the closet, right? And now they're not as much. Like, yeah, clearly young people, like, there's still a lot of fear. But as people get older now, it's a much easier process to come out of the closet. And now it's happening so much and so often that, oh my gosh, you're telling me that gay people actually want equal rights? Oh my gosh. Like, if we actually have to deal with this at a policy level, we have to deal with it in our churches, we have to deal with it at our bake sales, we have to deal with it at our band concerts. And so I think there's a generational thing happening, maybe not just a Christian thing, but there's a generational thing where they've had all they can stand and they can't stand no more, you know?
Yeah, it's like, the only thing I can really add to this is that, like, look, you know, like, we are supposed to love our neighbors ourselves. We're supposed to love our enemy. I'm not sure who the teacher thought this kid was, their neighbor or their enemy.
Yeah.
But either way, Jesus's command is to love them. So this teacher is without excuse. Find a way to love this person, or just to, you know, extricate yourself from the situation.
We are in a very important part. Like, since this is all new stuff, I'm sure what happened was this teacher got punished, right? And so, well, you got punished, and so you go talk to a lawyer, and you mention the fact that you're a person of faith. And so now these lawyers get delusions of grandeur. Like, we're going to go to court, and I'm going to make a precedent. I'm going to make law, you know? And so now you've got, like, you know, name big political activist committee who's going to shove tons and tons of money into your court case so that you can create, you know, legal precedent that favors one side or the other. And so all sorts of people who have other vested interests get in, and all of a sudden this becomes a growing snowball that this teacher probably has, little to no control over.
Yeah.
And so I think that's another part of it. So
That may very well be, yeah.
which is often the case here. And I think in the current legal political climate, and in the current climate where Christians are having their 15 minutes of fame, Christians are seeking to set every precedent they can possibly set before the clock runs out.
Let's hope that, they get over it. Just be Christians. Just don't vomit your Christianity up on other people.
Stay in your lane. That's how I would say it.
There we go. That's a
lane,
way less janky way of putting it.
Like, feed the hungry, clothe the naked, do write a good sermon now and then, invite your neighbor to a fish fry or something. Stay in your lane.
And, by fish fry, I mean catfish myself. Ooh, or cod.
Nice.
Like, these are the only acceptable fried fish.
That's right. Those are the two. Although, I mean, I'm a bit of a YouTube junkie, and like so many creative, sustainable ways of creating, delicacies out of alternative fish. So not that I'm a huge fish fan, but I'm a big fan of people who are trying to do their part, make a buck, and still be good for the earth, So
I really feel like what I need to do in the world is I need to create a cover band. So we will do songs from the band Fish. Nice. In the style of Nine Inch Nails, and we will call it Alternative Fish.
Nice.
And if anybody out there is like way better at making electronic music than me, please do this and put it on YouTube and give me the link.
Absolutely.
I want to hear this.
Nice.
But speaking of YouTube and whatnot and staying in your lane,
yeah,
it looks like some people thought we weren't staying in ours.
Oh man,
which is entirely possible.
There are episodes that are clearly going to get clicks. Like every time we talk about Hillsong and the Houstons, like we know that that's good for clicks. I did not think two guys who have very little following on YouTube were going to create any noise about debt forgiveness. But we did. Man, people are not happy with us. Not happy.
Oh, wow.
And then, like, even in the nice parts of their comments, they're not happy with us.
Well, if the nice comments aren't happy with us, then, man, we must have screwed something up real hard. Right. So what did we screw up here exactly?
So let me take two comments here, portions of two comments, and we'll just kind of throw them together. And it kind of nicely summarizes kind of where people are at with this. Franklin Ave comments, there's no cogent argument to this video to justify the debt forgiveness. And Fobalterra? That's how Fobalterra. Someone taking my money to pay for someone else's debt is not me forgiving a debtor. And they forgot the quotes, but I put them in there because I'm a nice guy.
Well, I have a very specific response for this.
Yeah. And
it's really easy, and it's not aggressive and weird.
Yeah.
For once.
Right.
So, Matthew 22:15-22, it's all about, Jesus is with his apostles, and they are traveling, and somebody stops them and is like, hey, is it okay to pay the imperial tax? And Jesus is like, back off, honky, render unto Caesar. I'm going to pay for that one, aren't I?
I hope so. That's going to be a wonderful conversation. I can't wait.
Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's.
Yeah.
Render unto God what is God's.
Yep.
And that's like, to me, that's the kind of the thing here. It's like our government levies taxes and they do whatever they want with those taxes.
Yeah.
Okay. I like in my taxes, I don't have problems with student loan forgiveness coming from my tax dollars. I have many problems with many other things that the government does with my money.
Yeah.
They're not asking me, what's your opinion? Where do you want your tax dollars to go? They're telling me where my tax dollars are going, and they are telling me that I'm paying those taxes or I'm going to jail.
Right.
Okay. So once that money leaves your hands, it ain't yours anymore. It's the government's. It is Caesar's. Okay.
Yeah.
We're giving to Caesar what is Caesar's. The government has every right to do whatever they want. And if that involves taking, like alleviating somebody's student loan debts, hey, that's great. Because I'm sure you didn't vote to have that money used for student loans in the first place. Never mind their forgiveness. Um, and the big thing here is like, there is no cogent argument.
That's the part that like made me fly off a handle. But go for
Yeah,
it.
it's
Yeah.
like, it's not an argument. It is a fact. The government can do what it wants. And who are we as Christians to say a debt should not be forgiven? Any kind of a debt, whether it be an interpersonal debt, like a monetary debt, whether it be an emotional debt, whether it be a spiritual debt. Who are we to say that that forgiveness is wrong?
Yeah.
I mean, you can talk about whether or not you think it's like a good use of government funds, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're just talking about, as Christians, there is no argument to say we cannot and to say that it's wrong to forgive a debt of any kind.
Yeah. So I've got a couple things here. First of all, like we need to talk about the second half of Matthew 22 there. Give to God what belongs to God, right? And the point of that is to put Christ followers in their place and say, look, it all belongs to God. None of it belongs to you. And if you think any of it belongs to you, you need to get your theology straight. And I need to get my theology straight because it is all that 100% of it, not 10%, not the 25% that you give to government. 100% of that is provision from God, right? So for you to think of it as your money or for you to make your decision with means that you are operating in a spiritual fallacy, right? So that's point one. Point two, it's just words matter, right? There's no cogent argument in this video to justify debt forgiveness. Well, there's lots of logical reasons to forgive debt. You just don't like them, right? In your worldview, Franklin Avenue, like charities does not extend to student loan forgiveness, and I would imagine in your worldview, charity doesn't extend to much of anything, right? And that might be harsh on my part, but once again, I think I've made it pretty clear that I think the way people do one thing is probably the way people do all things, right?
Yeah, it's like, remember, two things.
Yeah.
The greatest commandments, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and strength. And Jesus says, and the second commandment is like the first.
Right.
That's an important use of language there, is like. It is similar to the first.
Right.
Love your neighbor as yourself.
Right.
Because, the way that we serve God principally has nothing to do with what we do in church. It's what we do to other people.
Right.
It's like, if you want, there's a book, it's called, Ancient Near Eastern Thought and the Old Testament, written by John Walton. It's a fantastic book. Go read it and understand what exactly it meant to serve a God in the Old Testament context. In that world, what did it mean to be a servant to a God? And you'll understand a lot better what it means to be a servant to our God. And that, and that servanthood says we got to serve other people.
Absolutely.
So, what does it mean to love your neighbor as yourself? It means to forgive a debt, or to forgive part of a debt, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
I mean, to love your neighbor as yourself, that's what it means. You cannot say that you love your neighbor as yourself. You can't say that you love your enemy. If you complain about doing nice things for them, because, well, it puts you out in some way, it doesn't put you out because the government already took the money and was going to take it in the first place.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Moving on. Okay.
Moving right along.
Okay. Hey, we've got new subscribers, which is fantastic. And I've been looking forward to this week. First of all, YouTube, I hate you. I hate the fact that I get an email that tells me I have new subscribers. But then when I go to the YouTube creator portal, it doesn't tell me that, like, in one place it tells me I have a new subscriber and tells me their name. But in the place I go to see the collection of all this data, it's not there. Shame on you. But anyway, Philip Harbison, thank you so much for subscribing. Really appreciate it. And Fernando, I don't know if you used to watch Saturday Night Live, but back in the days when I watched Saturday Night Live, there was a comedian named Billy Crystal. And he had a character named Fernando, and it was fantastic. He was kind of this Latino superstar, sexy talk show host, but a little beyond his prime, and he would say, "You look marvelous." And Fernando, you do look marvelous to us.
And when you look good, you feel good. And when you feel good, you look good. And let me tell you something, you look marvelous.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Gosh. And, and my problem here is I see Fernando and I'm like, immediately, I'm like, hey, that's like, my second favorite ABBA song.
Oh, nice callback
is
there.
Fernando. It's a fantastic song. It's so great.
Yeah.
So, Fernando, if you've never heard of either of these things, I apologize for what we just did to you.
Nice. And you know who else looks marvelous? Rob Bell.
Oh yeah.
He's a good-looking guy, even with those. Like, I think the glasses are a little. I don't know what's the word. Pretentious. I think the glasses are a little pretentious, but Rob Bell's a good-looking guy.
I mean, he's like really kind of pulling that Paul Rudd thing.
Yeah.
Like like just getting grayer, but not really aging in some magical way.
Yes. And if anybody, like, if you guys don't know who we're talking about, just think Stephen Curtis Chapman, right? Keeps getting older, but never ages, you know? Kind of thing. But anyway, Rob Bell, we love you. We're waiting for you. We're waiting. We are waiting. So
yeah, because we keep getting older and we just become somehow less mature.
Indeed. All right. Anyway, so we love that you're subscribed, Philip and Fernando. For the rest of you, we love the engagement. By all means, please hit those thumbs up or thumbs down and the like buttons and subscribe buttons and the notify buttons. Leave comments for us in this episode. Tell us what you think of, like, the education of Christians. You know, do Christians need to be concerned about a shrinking majority in the U.S.? Are Christians less educated than they need to be about things like tithing? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments. Anywhere you can put Church's Lame in a search box, you put it in there and you'll find us. We love talking to you, love hearing from you. And if you want to put something in front of our eyes like that we will take special notice of, by all means, feel free to send us an email at churcheslamepodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah, and if just for 1 second you can put down your frying fish, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen.